Hello, everyone who has joined the webinar um, using automation to accelerate benefits from shared services. And thank you for joining in. I hope you and everyone around are safe and healthy during the current COVID-19 situation. Um, while we're fighting through this pandemic situation through self-isolation, social distancing, work from home, and various other means. My name is Praveen Kumar. I'm working at JK Technosoft, or we call it as JKT, as Vice President Digital and Innovation. And I'm your host and co-speaker for this webinar. Just to give you background, JKT is a 25 years old heritage company headquartered out of India, IT services company with offices in UK, Netherlands, USA, and other part of the world. We specialize in enterprise services like ERP, CRMs, platform services like cloud, Azure, AWS, and Google, custom development in various technologies, and digital transformation technologies like AI, IoT, RPA, and analytics, to name a few. In this webinar today, we'll be covering the topics of what are shared services, what are the benefits of implementing shared services, the KPIs around shared services, what are some of the automation possibilities when it comes to shared services functions, and then we'll take one of those automation possibilities, which is RPA, to elaborate a bit more and deep dive into some of the business functions of shared services like finance and accounting, HR, supply chain, contact center, and IT, and see how RPA can add value there. And towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. You can type in your questions on the right-hand top right corner of the Q&A window, or you can note it down and ask and post it to us towards the end of the session. I'm accompanied by my colleague Grant Farrell, who is an industry expert in shared services space, and we both will be covering the content of this webinar in next 30-35 minutes, followed by last 10 minutes for Q&A. Over to you, Grant, for a quick introduction, please, and talking about shared services.
Thank you, Praveen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grant Farrell, chartered accountant with over 25 years experience in shared services. Really, primarily looking at optimizing existing shared services, although initially I started off building shared services from scratch. I've worked in the private and the public sector. I've worked in the UK, rest of Europe, North America, including Canada and Asia. And I've also run training courses in all of those regions. And I've published articles on shared services as well in both the public and the private sector. If we move on to the next slide, please. If we look at what we mean by shared services and typically how we actually got there in the past, what we looked at, we said, okay, shared services is going to give us a geographically unconstrained organization which is focusing on the requirements of the customer. What we were delivering are high quality, non-core, mission critical services. The key thing to remember here is that what we were looking to do is to provide the customer with an improved service. So we need to deliver what we're doing more efficiently and provide that service at the equivalent cost at worst, but hopefully at a lower cost than we were initially doing. The way we went about this was initially we looked at organizational realignment, we looked at economies of scale, we looked at trying to use lower cost locations to take advantage of labor arbitrage, and we used best practice diagnostics to optimize our processes. More recently, we've seen technology come to the fore, and technology is there to enable us to optimize our shared service organization. So, Praveen, you're right. Next slide, please. Organizations are typically set up in two ways. You've either got centralized functions or decentralized functions. And both of these organizational structures have pros and cons. What we're looking to do with shared services is we're looking to take the best out of a decentralized organization, the best parts of a centralized organization, and giving us a highly customer-focused operation, which is commercially driven, is underpinned by the key ethos of the service partnership agreement. And that is where the person delivering the service has skin in the game, and the person who's actually the recipient of the service has to do their part as well. So you won't be able to run a shared service center if you just have the shared service center being beaten up by the business if they don't do so. You need the business to buy into the shared service center. So typically, we saw three benefits coming out of our shared service organization. We saw service level improvement. We saw the processes and the operations being delivered in a more efficient manner, and we saw an enhanced control environment. If you look at that and you establish a shared service center based on those three premises, that will be fine at the beginning. But what you need to do, and the most important thing nowadays, is to have a culture of continuous improvement. And the way you'll go about that is to continually evaluate your operations using the KPIs, which we'll look at a bit later. But you need to recognize the performance of the members of the shared service center and the members of the business operation. Typically, we look at the key business functions that make up our shared service organization. So we have finance and accounting, human resources, customer lifecycle management, supply chain logistics, and IT contact center. We've listed below some of the core business processes that come into these business functions, but I'll hand back over to Praveen now, who's going to go on about automation in shared services. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. So as Grant was mentioning, that it is imperative to have operational efficiency being driven by these business functions. And automation is one of the ways through which we can derive efficiency, improve quality, and cost reduction. And when we talk about automation in shared services, this has really become the new normal, where majority of the organizations are either already onto the journey of automation in their shared services functions, or have completed, or they're just in the beginning of the automation journey. In order to embark the journey or during the journey, there are three major changes which needs attention, which is changes to the process and workflow, where we identify automation points for existing manual workflows which can be automated. Then changes to the current operating model, where we gear up for adopting and adapting to new technologies, which also ensures consistency of operations. And the third one is the changes in talent development. Organizations with shared services functions, they focus more on domain expertise than low-cost resources, which can be doing all the rule-based repetitive tasks. And that's where automation comes to the picture of automating these rule-based repetitive tasks, while the shared services business functions can focus on domain expertise. Based on the report from McKinsey, some of the traditional areas which has been changing when it comes to operational efficiency, for example, is rather than focusing on unit cost of full-time employees, the shift has been towards what is the total cost of serving the customer. Things like simplified tasks and improving annual productivity to large-scale automation with defined roadmap and procedure. So it's more strategic in nature and less tactical. Although to start with, it can be tactical, but it has to have a wider vision. And then from the business outcomes perspective, rather than putting a lot of upfront investment, automation enables organizations to start with small investments, monitor, realize the benefit, and then move to the next set of improvements. Also, analytics-based decision making has been making a difference, where the data has data which is residing in various shapes and forms in the organization is being read more intelligently to give meaningful insights to businesses, so that they can take some informed decisions. There are various tools and technologies and platforms which are being used in the shared services today for automation, and some of them, as you can see on your screen, artificial intelligence or machine learning, which is towards getting the historical data, doing the analysis on that data, and then coming up with forecast or recommendation. This is one of the fast growing automation initiatives in the industry. Chatbots are low cost, high value solutions to drive efficiency in business functions which are close to end customers like contact centers, customer services, HR, because it touches the end user, and this can be built, deployed rather quickly. It takes weeks to develop a chatbot solution for a business process, and then deploy it, get it integrated with your downstream applications like ERP and CRM. And with all the platform providers like Amazon, Azure, Google, they all provide these platforms which can help organizations to easily build and deploy chatbot solutions. Data analytics, making sense out of terabytes of data, having a 360-degree view of your organization. This has been the core of automation. And then the fourth one, which we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about, is robotics process automation, which is actually a set of software programs mimicking the human actions. So, and let's talk a little bit more in detail. When you talk about RPA, anything which is repetitive, has a lot of volume in transactions, which is completely rule-based and does not require any judgment call, can be fully automated using robotics process automation, at least in phase one, because it also has an intelligent automation option to move towards the next stage. But to start the automation journey using RPA, the first thing is to identify repetitive, mundane, high volume transactions and processes which can be automated. And these bots, as we call it, they're not physical robots, they're software bots or programs which are actually sitting on top of your downstream applications and very easy to implement and integrate because they don't interfere with the existing IT infrastructure at all. Then when we talk about the benefits of the RPA, because it is not actually interfering with your existing IT infrastructure, it is very easy to implement and adapt. Scalability is another aspect where imagine if there's a need during a peak business hour to have more hand on the desk. Finding human resources might be very, very difficult for a short span of time. While if you've got software bots, on click of buttons, you can actually deploy X number of bots as compared to what you have at this point of time. So scaling up and scaling down becomes very, very easy. Since it is a software program which works based on defined rules and logs, and based on the logs it learns itself, it increases the accuracy. Based on the logs and other details that it generates, we can leverage a lot of features from the analytics perspective, and of course it reduces the cost quite significantly, both in terms of freeing up some human resource which can be focused towards more strategic tasks than doing the day-to-day, repetitive routine jobs. So these are some of the benefits of the RPA. Now, combining shared services, as Grant was mentioning earlier, and RPA together, how do we come to an agreement when it comes to defining the KPIs for businesses and business functions? I'll hand over to Grant to take this up, please.
Thank you, Praveen. So when we first looked at shared services, we said the customers need enhanced service levels at a lower cost. So how do we actually show improvement, and how do we actually show the customer that the cost base has gone down? A lot of organizations I went to started off work at, they didn't have a baseline. So you need an accurate baseline. You need to know what your costs are per FTE. You need to identify that before you start anything. So I cannot advocate highly enough the requirement for an accurate baseline. And when we look at the KPIs, a lot of organizations nowadays have got KPIs that they've had in place for a period of time. A lot of organizations have got too many KPIs. So what we can do is we work with you and establish the correct KPIs for your business. KPIs for your business need to be based on business rules, and you will also need to use relevant benchmark data, not just any benchmark data, but benchmark data that is applicable to your organization. Where the automation comes in is around the data collection. So the RPA tools that are available nowadays will enable you to get the KPIs in front of the decision makers pretty much next day. Now, the art of deciding which process improvements you need to put in place, that is a board level executive decision. But how they come about that is that where a KPI is showing you that something is going well, then there's no need to fix it. The KPIs that you need to focus on are the ones that are underperforming. Now, they're either underperforming because you set the KPI incorrectly, or they're underperforming due to process failure. If it's a process failure, then you need to sort of go through, identify what needs to be fixed, how you can optimize it, and then fix that process. That part of the decision-making process is actually done by people. So the KPI section here, this is a semi-automated process. Okay, Praveen, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. And as Grant was mentioning, these are primarily business function KPIs, which then any automation tool like RPA will complement and help in achieving these KPIs for business functions. So, for instance, when you talk about contact center automation, there are a set of people who are working the helpdesk function under contact center, who are receiving calls, receiving emails, logging incidents, following up on incidents on a regular basis, escalating it to appropriate levels. And there are leakages in there that we observe. And then once we put a RPA solution on top of it, it can automatically receive, check emails, read the emails, log tickets in the ServiceNow or any other ticketing tool, follow up with respective people as per the routine job. Similarly, for regulatory and compliance perspective, because it keeps track of all the transactions which is happening throughout the process journey, it becomes really easy for from the regulation and compliance perspective. Now, moving on, from here onwards, we're going to take one function at a time and then bisect that at the process level and try to identify what are the automation possibilities using RPA in those business processes. So let's talk about finance and accounting, as Grant has mentioned, as one of the key processes. And some of the sub-processes inside that is procure to pay, order to cash, record to report, and FP&A. And there could be more. And then we also divide that into a set of sub-processes or tasks, which then be evaluated through discovery workshops to identify automation possibilities. And based on what experiences that we have had, as you can see here on the screen, there are a set of categorization that we do on these sub-processes or tasks, which are what is the automation capability? Is it high, medium, or low? When we say high, it is generally greater than 80%. It goes up to 95%. Medium is anywhere between 60% to 80%, and low is less than 50%. So as you see in the source to pay automation, source to pay process, all these processes which are around transaction recording, payment processing, invoice processing, requisitioning, etc., which are very standard process being driven through ERP systems or CRM systems, can be fully automated or at least highly automated through RPA. Some processes, as you can see on the vendor selection, which is marked in green, and contract creation and negotiation, because they require a bit of an offline process, which anyway needs to be taken care by the team. And some of the experiences that you can see on the right-hand side that we have had working with some of our customers in the source to pay or F&A process about reducing the average handling time by 82%. Procure to pay process overall value delivery to some of the customers, like a real estate company for us, the reduction of about 4 FTE on a regular basis. This is one step that we have worked on, and we have had experience working with some of our customers, and we wanted to share with you. The next one is the human resource automation, and again, there's a set of various other processes, but if you group them together, it's employee management, payroll, recruitment, and reporting and compliance. And then there are sub processes, sub processes under these processes. And if you do the grouping and again try to come up with a matrix about covering what is the automation capability, most of the payroll processes, reporting processes can be fully automated or has a high automation capability. Some of the processes like appraisal or audit and compliance, salary negotiations, for example, which require a face-to-face interaction or a must-have offline process, that has been mentioned. And we have been working again in the HR automation area about facilitating employee onboarding, joining, automating the payroll process across 1,200 stores for one of our customers to ensure that we not only reduce the cost but also drive the efficiency and increase the accuracy level. Talking about supply chain automation, the processes which are which we have catered to is inventory management, logistics, vendor management and procurement, and reporting and compliance. And going deep into again these processes and classify them into automation capability. The general processes under supply chain, like product hierarchy, production planning, forecasting, having some reporting requirements across inventory, vendor, order management, performance, warehouse management. These all general processes, which are almost standard processes across industries, can be highly automated. Similarly, all the master management piece of it, be it material master, vendor management, customer master management, they all can be fairly have a fairly high automation capability. Some of the things again, like vendor onboarding, which requires some physical signatures and etc., can would still need to go through the offline process. And our experience and some of the experiences shared is reducing the time which used to take about 5 days for end-to-end process completion when it comes to supply chain was reduced to about 8.5 hours, and about 3,000 plus inventory items being processed by a set of bots on a daily basis. And then we also did work on material master management automation, supplier onboarding, invoicing and shipping, and several other use cases that we have had in recent past working with our customers. Now, when you talk about IT and customer support automation, there are two sections, sections of it. One is the IT, which is inside the organization, and there's a customer support part of it, and then there's a end user support, which also falls into the contact center category. So we're talking about both of them here. Contact center we'll talk separately in a while, but internal IT and contact center which caters to communication inside the organization, security, managing the infrastructure, fulfilling the orders internally with hardware, softwares, etc. And then the assurance, which is again the help desk part of the contact center. Most of them have a high automation capability, except for some audit reports, some software installations which requires physical keys, which can only be lying with a certain individuals, and then also some fallouts and exceptions. We have had experience working with one of the largest manufacturers of doors and windows, where we did the onboarding of employees and provisioning of those employees into the system on a regular basis using RPA, which involves providing them access to the office, access to the softwares, the databases, the hardware, and then putting them in respective groups, and then also deprovisioning, which is at the time of a dealing process, the access, etc., needs to be restored. So this whole process was automated again. And as I said, we'll specifically talk about contact center for a minute, where we talk about the help desk or backend operations, the virtual assistant where we use chatbots and etc., and then having cross-sell and upsell option as one of the modules. And as you can see, almost every single process has a very, very high automation capability. And this is primarily because this is one of the most mature, shared services functions, in the organization. Um, there are a lot of documentations available, lot of data which is all readily available for bots to pick up and start working on. Um, some of the experiences, as you can see, is that for one of the UK retailers, there were about 120 agents working in various shifts. We were able to save about 200K out of that team budget using RPA. Up until now, we've talked about shared services. We talked about RPA, how RPA and shared services help each other using, achieving the business KPIs, and then some of the process level and sub-process level automation capability assessment, and some use cases and examples that we have worked on. I'm just going to give a quick brief about the implementation methodology. That how do we go about implementing or starting the RPA journey in an organization? And the first thing that we do is that we have a very strong design thinking team and a design thinking framework through which we discuss with the business stakeholders and respective people in the organization to find out the set of objectives that we want to achieve, which are people desirable, business viable, and technical feasible. And then we rank them based on the priorities and ROI. Once we have that established, then we go through the second level of assessment before we actually start the automation process, where we do the consolidation, where we stop all the automation opportunities, check their feasibility. Then we do the harmonization, where we try to find out linkages between different processes, different interfaces, workflows. Then we also discuss with the process teams to optimize and remove efficiencies in the existing workflows, eliminating some of the redundant steps. And then once we have that established, then we move towards planning for real automation. And as I said, RPA, there are certain platforms through which we work, which is Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Blue Prism, and Crayon. They are the industry-leading RPA platforms. And then once we have the automation backlog identified, we do the elicitation, filtering them based on their feasibility, prioritizing them at the sub-process level, analyzing the process complexity at the sub-process level, and then the quantify and submit a business plan to the key stakeholders for approval, clearly showcasing the ROI realization in short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And this whole exercise of discovery to coming to an evaluation plan or a business plan submission generally takes about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on which process, how many applications are involved, what data is readily available, number of steps, and the stability of those steps during the business processes. Once we have that established, we put together a roadmap, and the first thing on the roadmap is to do a quick POC. Now the POC is to have one process identified, which we can then complete in about 2 to 4 weeks max. We do that POC, we deliver that POC to the business, and then the business will decide if this is going to give adequate return of investment or not. And based on that, the detailed program plan, etc., is finalized. And then once we have that established, we put the operational or execution part of the automation, which is around designing, building, testing, then moving towards enhancing the existing processes and also scaling the operations. But towards the end, more importantly, giving the organization this ability to create a center of excellence where the business teams can actually manage the bots and run the automation program rather than being highly dependent on technology and IT teams. That has been one of the objectives of our RPA implementation approach. Some of the engagement models in which we work with our customers, and this is probably standard across organizations as well, is the first one is a managed services model where we acquire the license of RPA OEMs like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, or Crayon. We provide the infrastructure, we provide the solution, and then we charge the organizations on a per transaction basis. The second one is that if the organization already has a license from one of the RPA platform providers, then we augment and create a team together to deliver the projects either in a time and material or a fixed cost model. And the third one is a new license procurement model where the organization is trying to acquire or identify which RPA platform is best suited for their business. Then we help them, procure the licenses and then work in the phased automation manner throughout the journey. Now this takes us towards the end of this presentation for this RPA and shared services. Grant, over to you for your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Praveen. Just a couple of things that I'd like to add in here. I think for me, looking at it from a shared service practitioner's perspective, one of the major factors involved here is to ensure that we've got robust business rules in place. So we're going to implement our RPA solution based on our business rules. So this gives us an opportunity to review the business rules. I think for me as well, looking at shared services, there's no point in building a shared service center and then just leaving it and hoping for the best. Another major benefit here is the automation of the collection of the KPI data and enabling us to add that to best practices and foster our process improvement culture. For me, the most important thing here is that by using RPA to eliminate the repetitive tasks, what we're doing is we're freeing up our people, our most valuable assets, to focus on the exceptions to improve the processes, but also for them to focus more on the value-added tasks for the business. Thank you, Praveen.
Thank you, Grant. And now we'll open the floor for any questions that you may have. You can type in the question in the Q&A window. I've got the first question. Hello, we are a leading industry in building materials in India. What are the use cases you can propose for a cement or ready-mix plant operations? I'll take that question, Grant. So we have had experiences, as I was sharing, that with the real estate industry and the cement industry as well, and we can share you more details. But anything which you can imagine as a mundane task, for example, purchase requisition, for example, vendor onboarding, or you're receiving invoices and then you have to match the invoice against the purchase order. All these processes can be automated at a fairly high probability through RPA. But yeah, we can share more details with you offline about our experiences in the cement and ready-mix plant operations. Thanks, Ranjan, for asking this question. I've got another question, and Grant, it looks like this is for you. Should we be looking to optimize our processes and then implement RPA, or do we go with the working assumption that everything can be automated to a degree and just manage the exceptions?
That's an age-old question. So historically, what we looked at, we said, okay, so you've got to optimize your processes before you can do anything. But when you're looking to implement a technology-based solution, it's a big cultural shift in an organization. So what you're looking for here is confidence within the business. You need the solution to work. So what I would advocate here is to look for process, start with the processes that only require something in the region of 10% optimization, implement the solution based on that. Whilst you're doing that, in the background, look for the other processes that will require optimization. But as I say, really get the business confidence, get the business buy-in, go for the processes at the outset that require minimal optimization, and then you can expand the rollout after that.
Okay. Thanks, Grant. One question from Yogesh. Can I see some of the case studies of the RPA implementation? We've discussed this in the slides, Yogesh, during the discussion that I shared about our experiences in different business functions. But I'll let my team know that they can share more details with you offline, if that is okay. There's another question, which is, does the BOT mimic the human actions only, or can it simulate the IT ones as well? Yeah, the bots can actually mimic human actions and IT processes as is to achieve the required results. So, for example, if you need to do the network provisioning or providing access to people on infrastructure, or there's a script which is running towards the midnight, taking backups of the databases, and they need monitoring, and if it is failing, some actions needs to be taken. All these IT related processes can also be automated through RPA with adequate log and auditing enabled. I hope it answers your question. Okay, any further question? Probably we'll wait for another 30 seconds for any other questions to appear. Meanwhile, just to let you know that this webinar has been recorded, and the team will be sending out the recordings and the details of the content of this webinar shortly. In maybe in a day or two to all of you who have joined. Okay, now since I don't see any further questions, I would again thank you for joining in. And if you have any questions, as I said, either you can reach out to me or you can write to marketing@jktech.com. So thank you again for your time and listening to us. Stay safe, and bye for now. Thank you. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.